Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is The Line. I'm Luxander. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ben. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm back. I booted Arden off the show for today because I got free time. And in case people weren't updated, because I think it's been a bit since I've been around, but I quit my residency, but not forever. I just quit this residency. I'm changing specialties. Hopefully going to be a kidney specialist eventually someday. So I know I had gone into medicine and was really hoping to get involved a lot with gender affirming care, and I still think that that's important. However, like I tell a lot of people here, if advocacy is harmful for your mental health and not something that's helpful for you, it's okay to be able to step back. And I found out I enjoy just being a trans person that exists in the world of medicine and not having to defend my right to exist every single day. And so that's been healthy for me to just be like, gender doesn't matter in the specialty at all.
Yeah. It's good to just have trans people, existing in society. I do feel that there's an expectation that we have to be activists at all times of our lives. You can't be a famous trans person or a highly visible trans person without that weighing on you, the expectation of you being the good one. You have to be a representative. You have to answer all the questions. So yeah, it makes sense shifting specialties and getting out of that. Some of us are masochists and make that our primary job. But yeah, it's good to see you out there just being successful too, just as a person who happens to be trans. That's good stuff.
Yeah, so I am still practicing medicine. I'm now independently licensed. It's just I'm operating in more of a general military doctor sense and doing whatever until I go back into training. So I'm here.
Nice,
you guys got me back. I know it tried to get rid of me. Not going to happen so easily. So callers, I know we have at least one back there already wanting to talk about medical related things, but I'm here a lot more now. So save up your questions and bring them to the show.
Yeah. It'll be great to have you in the rotation more. Cause I know that some people get kind of frustrated that it's trans femme central here sometimes. So yeah, we're doing what we can to get the non-binary rep and the trans guy rep. It's a good balance here. We're fair and we're balanced.
Yes, balanced.
Anyway, it's a classic Cody Johnston reference. Some more news if anybody follows some more news. But so let's talk about last week's poll. I was not here last week. I have no idea what the poll was. Okay, so asking about, has the swing in polls toward Kamala and Walz given you any hope for the future of trans rights in the US? 86% of our responders said yes. I haven't been in the comments of people who say no, but I'm curious, what do you think of this, Ben?
Yeah, I'm a lot more hopeful. Of course, there's some reservation of you just don't know what's going to happen, and there's still a very, very loud and somehow persuasive other side.
Yeah.
And so who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what tantrums are going to come from whatever happens? And I am hopeful, at least more so than I was, and especially watching the hang up. I believe it was the hang up recently with Andrew Seidel talking about this specific issue. I guess they didn't necessarily approach it from the trans perspective, but just in general, the fact that he's more hopeful makes me more hopeful as well, because I don't understand the politics as much as some other people. But it is nice that we seem to have a little bit of something good coming. I'm still also part of it is I just don't expect good things to happen to the trans community. I'm is this sure. Is this are they joking? Is this a dream? Because I'm there's always something that's gonna get fucked up along the way, and I just based on the history, I'm a little bit reserved still, but more hopeful.
I agree. Yeah, I'm still quite reserved because we can't just assume that because we have new blood in the Democratic Party, that does not necessarily mean the Democrats are going to win. But when we see the polls start to change, that kind of feels like a little bit more reliable. You can a little bit more. You can invest a little bit more energy into thinking like, oh, okay, well maybe this does mean that things are going to get better. Although if you have flashbacks to 2016, the polls also made it kind of seem like Hillary Clinton was going to win, and that just wasn't the case. But I do think, now that you can't compare Trump and Biden, like you're comparing Trump to like a 50-year-old woman, like he's old enough to be her dad. And so we're not hung up on this whole Biden being incompetent thing or getting too old or whatever. And yeah, Walz has specifically been, I don't know to the extent to which he's been super pro-trans. They put tampons in the school bathrooms and they included the men's bathrooms. So like that could be viewed as pro-trans. And I will say he was the sponsoring teacher for a GSA back in the 90s when that was like really not something that people considered like okay. And he was like, I'm the football coach and I'm going to be the sponsor of the GSA because that means that nobody will mess with these kids. And so at the very minimum, we've got him on gay rights. So yeah, I would say I'm feeling a little bit more hopeful for the future of trans rights in the US. I'm still going to move out of Kansas because, we still are having our rights stripped away on the state level. So I'm going to move to somewhere that's safer on the state level. But yeah, on the federal level, I'm a little bit less worried about like federal criminalization or crazy shit like that. So yeah. What about this week's poll though? We've got a new question for you all to go to the community tab and answer. This is topical. If you've seen the news from Texas, should trans people's driver's license / birth certificate reflect their current gender or their sex at birth? I don't know if you've seen the news, Ben, but Texas just decided like on an executive level, basically, that they're not going to respond to court-ordered change of gender. And the same thing happened in Kansas like earlier this year or last year. And so it's, and the cherry on top is that they have made a list and they're checking it twice of everybody who has made that change previously and everybody who attempts to make the change in the future. So me and Arden have our names on some lists now, presumably. Yay, very fun. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think people should be able to use the labels that they want to. If people want to change those documents, they should be allowed to. And if they don't want to change those documents, they should also be allowed to not to. I see very little utility in these markers at all on these documents.
Sure.
Like it doesn't impact anything other than like how some random security guard or some cop or somebody is going to like talk to you.
I mean, it can affect your employment and housing.
Well, yeah. But like, apart from that, like the things that it shouldn't impact, but unfortunately does. It's like, it's only necessary for the society that we live in to have it align with certain things. But like the arguments that people will make about, well, but how is your healthcare team going to know what organs you have if it's not on your documentation, or like how, like that's not the issue here at all. Like these markers have zero utility outside of like societal labeling of people.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I think that the government like shouldn't be so strict about who gets to change it and who doesn't. Like it's just an F or an M, like, or an X in a lot of cases. Just let people do what they want to do with it. Like other things, I could see having other things on there being more important, like your name, like where you were born, things like that, that actually matter. Yeah, things that matter for identification. Like, can we find the right person? Sure, sometimes that label can make a little bit of a difference, but for trans people, it's going to be confusing regardless. So I don't think it's a missing piece of the puzzle that would otherwise make the rest of the picture make any more sense.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm not like a gung-ho, we need to have a sex designation or a gender designation on our ID or anything. It would make a lot of things easier if we just didn't have it. But as long as we live in a society where that is the standard, because there's like inherent risk involved with your documentation not matching your appearance.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's a problem for a lot of trans people all over the place. And yeah, some states have a requirement that you have to be sterilized in order to get these documents changed, which is obviously highly restrictive and mildly genocidal. But yeah, I know some people are going to have a difference of opinion between driver's license and birth certificate. So feel free, everybody, to leave comments expounding on your answer, so that we can have a nice, robust discussion about this next week, reflecting what some of the community believes about this. If you're ready for calls, I'm just about ready for calls. I do want to real quick let everybody know, first of all, hit the motherfucking like button. It immediately helps the show. It's a quick, easy, and free way to show your support for the line. And I also want to let y'all know, this is just one wonderful show on this great network we have. And next week, this is the schedule. We have the Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central with Erika and Seth Andrews. We've got Skep Talk on Monday with Shannon Q. We've got Chewed Gum on Tuesday with Alyssa and Eve. And then on Wednesday, we've got The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty, Will Judy, and on Thursday, you can catch me and Arden on the Transatlantic Call-In Show. That'll be our last show of the month. So feel free to hop in and say hello to any of those shows next week. And hopefully y'all have a great weekend in the meantime. So for calls, do we want to just start at the top with Nick, since that's a nice, hot, relevant question for both of us? Yeah. All right.
Let's do it.
We're going to start with Nick. Him from Illinois wants to talk to us about male privilege. Nick, you are on the Transatlantic Call-In Show. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys?
So good. So ready.
Yeah, we're ready for this conversation.
Lay it on us, Nick. What do you got today?
There's been a lot of online debate about like whether, I guess, trans men can access, male privilege, and whether it gives them, I guess, a leg up, I guess, on like more femme trans folks.
Yeah. You want to start, Ben?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, Nick, what thoughts do you have kind of going into this? Or would you rather us talk first?
Well, I'm kind of torn. I'm a trans guy who has, mostly transitioned. I'm looked at as a man in basically my everyday life, and I feel like cis men definitely treat me differently than they used to. Yeah, and specifically, I would say I don't get sexually harassed anymore. Instead, they try to include me in, locker room talk, which it feels like kind of a privilege, but, it's weird and gross.
It's a little gross. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's kind of a mixed picture with this. I think largely I would say no. I would say just by being a trans man or just by transitioning does not inherently give you like all of the male privilege that like we associate with being male privilege. I will say that cis passing trans men often has an easier time and may inherit some more social privilege than other people. But that's very community dependent. It's very dependent on if you're open or not. Oftentimes, if you're an openly trans man, no matter how passing you are, you could still be seen as less than. But we have to think about this in kind of the context of like hegemonic masculinity, right? So there's like the top tier of like the alpha males that most people want to be for some reason. And if you're anything but that, you are less than. And unfortunately, most people are not that, and people work very, very hard to try to become that. And so we even see a large amount of cis men that don't get the full extent of what we consider to be male privilege, because you'll see, especially a lot of queer men of all varieties, even though they're cis men, if you come across as more femme, or if you engage in activities that are not masculine, or if you work as a teacher, or some like stupid things like that that shouldn't have an impact on your masculinity, people still say that those make you less of a man. And so I think it's hard to say that is just by being a passing trans man, is that enough to give you that full male privilege? I don't think so. I don't think it's enough. I think there's some things that have changed for me where I have benefited from like passing as a man. I would agree that decrease in sexual harassment is a form of privilege. I would say I have gained privilege in like being able to walk outside at nighttime and not feel as worried that I'm going to like be assaulted. Like there's certain things that I have gained, but there are also other things that I will never be able to achieve in the same ways. Like there's still parts of me, especially physically, even though I largely pass, like I'm still very small. I still have some aspects of my body figure that if somebody like transvestigated super hard, they could probably like out me to a whole lot of people. And there's still ways that like I would still be othered. And some of that too, I think, is not even just in physical. And I apologize for kind of going on a little rant here, but like even talking about the way that people are raised and socialized, when you're socialized to be a woman, and then you go out and like adopt a male role in society, some people have a pretty easy time like making that adjustment and kind of blending in. I know for me, being raised evangelical, being told like my place was to listen to men and to be submissive, and my voice didn't matter, I needed to be quiet. Like I carried that into adulthood, thinking that I should listen to other people before I speak. I should not be as confident in the room. And so entering, especially like a job interview or entering some corporate setting where you're competing against cis men who are taught that their voice does matter and that they do belong in that room, they are in charge. It's a lot harder to bridge that gap for some of us. And similarly, things that you are taught at a young age, things like motor skills, like spatial skills, math skills, those are things we don't really talk about, like being a privilege that you kind of obtain at a younger age. But like a lot of effort isn't invested in girls learning those things because we're taught you're not going to be good at math, you're not logical enough, or like this is a man's job to build things. And so then the formative years where you would have been able to obtain those skills a lot quicker, you miss that time frame and now have to catch up later on. And so I would say it's very mixed, and it's also very individual dependent on kind of where you grew up, like how your family was, your physical attributes as well. But so that's a long roundabout way to say I think the answer is yes and no, and that it's a complicated issue.
I mean, it's highly conditional, basically. Like, I think that's kind of what it ultimately comes down
Yeah.
to. Because, first of all, just coming out and saying I'm a man does not give you male privilege. It honestly is, if anything, more likely to increase the amount of like infantilizing misogyny that you're experiencing. And then going on testosterone also doesn't just like automatically grant you male privilege. Like when I was on like a normal dose of testosterone, I was like trying really hard to integrate socially into a male role. And it was not easy for me because guess what? Yeah, boy, can't grow any facial hair. And when you first start T, you have this really round baby face thing going on down here. So it just, it really didn't look good on me. Like I was trying really, really hard. And yeah, like you will lose it if you don't try to maintain all of these things. Like if you decide you want to have long hair, you'll lose some of that. And if you ever paint your fingernails, you will lose some of that. If you're in a gay relationship with a man, you will lose some of that. So it's like hard to say how much of a privilege is it really if it's something that you can lose so easily. And like, yeah, I think there are some very, very lucky trans men who, you know, the testosterone hits them like a truck, or they start really young and they grow the beard and they have the big muscles and like they just completely socially integrate. And that's great. But they're still like, it's predicated on them maintaining some level of stealth and like obscuring facts about their childhood. Like, let me tell you how many times I used to tell people that I played baseball as a kid instead of softball because like I was omitting or changing facts about my childhood to make it like to just obscure the fact that I'm trans. So yeah. Sorry, Nick, we did throw a lot at you right there. I want to give you a chance to respond though.
No, that's very helpful. That's great. Yeah, I think you really explained all of it really well. And I guess I just have a question about, you mentioned socialization, and I guess like, male socialization is a thing that gets thrown at trans women a lot. And so it gets kind of contentious when I guess you try to bring up female socialization for, I guess, trans men, I guess. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Part of the issue is that trans women, for the most part, did not have unfettered male privilege because a lot of the time trans women are effeminate or they're quiet or they want to hang out with the girls or whatever. Like, I think there's this assumption when we have this discussion, and I'm not saying that this is an assumption that trans men make, but like trans women, I think are a little bit defensive about this because there's this narrative of the Caitlyn Jenners of the world who, world famous, successful male athlete for like most of her life and then transitioned at a much older age. And yeah, like I think that you might have a clearer cut case there of like she was a beneficiary of male privilege. But like, yeah, I think a lot of trans women are very sensitive to this because they did not have access to the full cabinet of things that come with male privilege. Like simple things like we were talking about earlier, like painting your nails and stuff like that. Like the box that men or people assigned male can exist in is very small. And if they go outside of that, then yeah, they don't get treated nicely. They don't get, all of the benefits. They don't get all of the promotions and everything. But I do feel that it's frustrating sometimes as a person who is assigned female trying to talk about my socialization that like, I feel like I'm not allowed to talk about it to an extent because there's this reaction. There's this assumption that if I'm talking about being socialized female, then that means that I'm somehow also making a statement about people being socialized male. Like, yeah, there are little stupid things that I still get upset about. Like, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this assigned female, but like when you were a kid and family members would just get you random fucking soap for Christmas. Like random soap, it smells good that you were never going to use. It's like, you could get to know me as a person or you could buy me something fun. Like, but no, it's fucking soap every goddamn time. Yeah. And being told to be quieter, and having to, like you said, Ben, find your assertiveness. And then as you transition to male, suddenly people are telling you, oh, you're speaking over everybody. And it's like, I had to earn and learn how to speak out and not like let my boundaries be stomped on and make a presence for myself. And so, yeah, it feels like we're still being expected to some extent to walk this tightrope of, I want to be assertive. I don't want to follow in this like be quiet and shut up kind of thing that people assigned female are raised with. And like weirdly, it still feels like the same kind of misogynistic, well, women talk too much. And it's like I've transitioned and now I'm masculine and I should be able to assert myself. But within the queer community, there is this like, you're speaking over trans women thing that I just, it rubs me the wrong way for sure.
Yeah. And that's, I think where Nick is maybe going with this discussion, and I think that's where a lot of us have beef with this. Like, this topic is so heated, and it has become, in a lot of places, trans people just throwing each other under the bus when we shouldn't be fighting each other. Like, trans women are not the problem for trans men, and trans men are not the problem for trans women, and non-binary people are not the problem for either of them. Like, we are not each other's problem unless we individually are being a problem for each other.
Yeah.
Like, if they throw you under the bus, okay, like, that's being a problem. But like, it's so often, and I've seen this a lot just from my own experience, and so I'm sure there are trans women who've experienced this from the other side, but I've had a lot of experiences on the internet where trans women have thrown trans men under the bus, saying that, like, we don't deserve as much of a voice, we don't deserve as much advocacy because we have privilege, or because we're not as, like, violently assaulted, which is not true.
Not even true.
It's not even true. We're just not, our stories aren't as publicized. Our stories are not as seen. And so that, because our stories aren't as seen, it's taken as, you guys are doing fine, like, you don't need any of this assistance, but we do. We're part of this as well. And the best thing we can do is, like, instead of using our perceptions to throw each other under the bus, use this to engage in conversation and say, here's what I'm having trouble with. Can you help me from the privilege on your side? And on the flip side, for each other, like, what can we do for each other to eliminate some of this, instead of just saying, well, obviously the grass is greener on your side, when that's not necessarily the case at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you pretty much covered all the discourse points that's been going around on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
The internet is
It's
a vile place.
It is. Yeah, there's always, like, I think that sometimes we direct our ire toward an easier target than the real problem. You know, it's so difficult to combat this whole society-wide patriarchal, like, dominance issues, whatever, blah blah blah, like, and the way that we're all raised in these, like, assigned gender roles that are imposed on us. And I think that, you know, sometimes it's just like, let's hit an easier target, like other trans people who are obviously not ultimately responsible for this, but who are more responsive. Like, we're more likely to successfully get them to change or feel bad, instead of, like, yeah, trying to direct that towards some larger group. But yeah, Nick, we really appreciate your call. This is a great conversation to have, especially it's nice to have me and Ben on here to talk the trans mask angle and everything.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any further questions, I think we'll go ahead and let you go. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a longtime listener, and I think you guys are great. So thank you for taking my call.
Awesome.
Bye.
Yeah, we really
Thanks for calling
appreciate you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. That was a good convo. Do you have any wrap-up thoughts on that one?
Yeah. No, that's a topic I could go on about for
All day.
days. Just because I don't think it's talked about enough, and I have had so many very frustrating encounters with people where it's been other trans people just telling me to shut up because I have so much privilege. And I will say, like, individually, I have a lot of privilege that I can use, but part of that is I'm financially stable. I have the ability to move when I need to, apart from what the military tells me to. Like, I'm a physician. I have some level of authority. I have ability to make some changes. Like, I individually have a lot of privilege. It's not because I'm a trans man. It's because of other privilege. But hopefully we can all identify our own areas of privilege where we have them and use them to help other people. And that's what we should do.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely weird, like, after having been in a masculine kind of gender presentation for a while, and now, like, kind of not being in that as much, I'm suddenly, like, dealing with all of those same anxieties about being perceived female. And I'm like, I'm gonna double up on the pepper spray that I carry. Like, there's just all this anxiety that comes into it suddenly because again, it's super conditional. It can change from one person to the next, really.
Yep.
So real quick, everybody in the chat, don't forget to hit the like button, and also your $5 or more super chats we will read out loud at the end of the show. So if you want to make sure we see your comments, we want to respect our callers, so we're not sitting here reading chat. Yeah, again, the like button is free, easy, quick, and free. So who do we want to take next? Do we just want to kind of go in order today?
Yeah, that's fine. Unless there's something that stands out to you.
Yeah, let's make sure we get Matthew in today. But other than that, I think we can just kind of go take him in order.
Yep.
Let's go with Lucas, he, him from Brazil. You are on the Transatlantic Call-In Show. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
Doing super good.
Doing all right.
All right.
Okay,
So your question is about, importance of LGBTQI labels. Lay it on us.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you for taking my call. I really love this show, love this channel. Second, I am from Brazil, so English is not my first language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. I'm also really, really anxious. But okay, let's do this. So,
right.
I was thinking about it. I would like to discuss about how we can perceive and how we can act upon the our own labels in an individual and in a collective aspect. So I'll give an example from my own experience. I consider myself a gender fluid person, but recently and in the process where I was experiencing beginning to perform other genders, there were a lot of people who were like, well, you're kind of gender fluid in this way, but not in that way. Or you're like not exactly gender fluid under my perspective, but in another perspective. So there's a lot of debate coming from other people about how I should identify. And I always took it as I think a learning experience to really put in perspective what I consider gender, how did it affect me, how I was performing or expressing myself. But it also was really difficult for me to find myself inside the conforms of a specific label, I think. But in another way, I always thought about how labels are primarily or most important in a collective sense, like the way LGBTQIA plus people identify and unite under the same fight for rights, for social justice, for public policies. I think I always thought that the way I identified myself or the way I labeled myself was always second to the way that I would label myself in a collective form rather than an individual form. So I would first identify myself within this community and within this movement because I was so against the cultural cis-normative prerogatives that our society has, or the violent public policies that they put up against LGBTQIA people. So I will first of all see myself inside that movement and inside that fight. But in an individual aspect, I will always kind of have a lot of trouble, I think, of how I identify myself and how I express myself. Does that make sense? I'm sorry if I'm mumbling.
Yeah, no, it's really frustrating, especially as a non-binary person, for people to be like, well, you're not non-binary enough. Like, well, I've decided arbitrarily that you seem like you might be a non-binary a little bit sometimes, but then not in these other ways. I've decided, and it's, it's always something dumb like, that they're still perceiving you through the lens of your assigned gender at birth. Like, oh, well, you still talk a lot and you sit with your legs far apart. Therefore, you're not really gender fluid because you're just really a man still. Like, it's really obnoxious. And like, yeah, those external pressures can make it really hard to figure out what your individual label is. Although I will say, I feel like gender fluid is one of the best labels because it's like, I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to do what I want. So like gender fluid means I can present as what I was assigned at birth if I want to, or I could present as like a flaming F slur, or like I could look like a drag queen today. If there's any label that you should feel like I can call myself this kind of no matter what I'm doing, it's going to be that one. Because what do these people think that gender fluid means? That you have to switch between looking like a man one day and like a woman the next day? Like you have to be perfectly 50-50 every day? Like, I don't even know what that... Yeah, that's like the dumbest thing to impose impositions on. But yeah, and like I am a person, as a non-binary person, I have defaulted to using labels that are very broad. Like most of the time I just say I'm trans and non-binary. And like, if you really want to know, I identify as agender, which means I don't identify with any particular gender. Like I don't really functionally have one. And yeah, I do find it a little bit frustrating when people are like, I'm going to put like 50 gender labels on myself. I am a demi boy and this, that, and the other. And there's a brand new flag. And you're reading all the definitions and you're like, all of these just mean trans masculine. Anyway, yeah. So, and I personally also rarely you will hear me say LGBTQIA+. I default to just saying like the queer community, because to your point, like I do think that sort of creates a sense of unity where we don't really need to be concerned with who exactly is in the group. We're not having an argument about whether asexuals are in the group or not. We're not having a conversation about whether non-binary people are in the group. And yeah, I do think that sometimes that nitpickiness can disrupt the underlying unity. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
It's harder for me to weigh in on this discussion because I'm a binary trans man. But labels, labels are just, in my opinion, just a way to communicate who you are to other people, or as a sense of like, if you find a sense of identity in a label, like it's basically for you to use either like kind of in one of those two ways. And so the label itself doesn't have a whole lot of significance other than like for communication purposes. And so I'm not as strict about like, especially in like lay speech of, oh, you used this label, but do you meet all these like XYZ criteria of being an agender or gender fluid person? It's like, no, I don't think that you can standardize criteria for those things. I don't think you can standardize criteria for being a binary trans man. Like, labels are dynamic. People are dynamic. You can change your label over time. You can, like, a lot of things can change. And if there's one label that you say, this is for me, then awesome. Like, I encourage like people to communicate that. And my whole perspective is just like, I ask that my friends tell me what their preferences are so I can respect them, because I don't want to do something that's going to disrespect them. So I just want to be aware so I can act appropriately. But whatever label you want to use, like, that doesn't restrict you to using certain pronouns or dressing a certain way or living a certain way. So it's like very much an individual thing of, and going back to our previous conversations of using kind of those labels as a way to integrate yourself into society, to be treated in the way that you desire to be treated. That's kind of like one of the biggest utilities of the labels. And so that's where I could see people really wanting to adhere to a label and carefully communicating those things. But it's very, it kind of, to me, is a very individual thing of the personal preference of whoever that person is. Like, granted, that's in the setting of like what we're talking about here, kind of like with communicating your identity and your sense of self to other people. I feel a little bit differently about like definitions in like a clinical setting or in like a research setting where there needs to be set criteria and needs to be standardization of the terms. I treat these spheres very differently, and there even needs to be some caution in making sure when you're having a debate or a discussion, like which sense of the words are we talking about, because they can carry different meanings. But for personal and like social use, that's kind of where I lean on that. But I know it's a very nuanced discussion, and especially for people who are non-binary of the many different varieties, I don't connect as personally with some of these like nuances as maybe you both would.
Did that clear things up, or did it obscure things, Lucas?
Yeah.
No, it helped a lot. Like, if I could like relate or talk about a little bit of what was my experience, it was really freeing to finally I have like a label that I can use to express myself. And but then as I went on, I kind of found this like roadblocks, or people that would like I said, put a lot of more of criteria, and that made me really doubt myself about how I was expressing myself, how I was trying to figure out what was going on, or how I felt comfortable. But I had like the greatest privilege of having a lot of really good friends that helped me along the way. Like in Brazil, in Portuguese, all our nouns are gendered. So when you say friend, you have like a specific word for a male friend and a specific word for a female friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some days where I would like perform masculinity, and then they would call me by my male friend name. And sometimes when I first started performing or different gender performances, they really catch on, and they like naturally switched to calling me like the female friend equivalent when I was performing what I would like believe to be more feminine traits or etc. And so that really helped me in the beginning to feel like I'm feeling comfortable here, and I'm trying to like determine or find out what is this line that I cross, why is the line there, who put this line there, what does this line between like gender performances mean to me and to my cultural background. And I found in gender fluid and like non-binary specifications something that really talked to me. And so I fully embraced and fully entered, like I said, not only the individual aspect of expressing myself, but also the collective aspect. I would participate in queer collectives, in queer conversations, queer groups, queer public manifestations, because I felt myself a part of that community and a part of that fight, right? That movement for something better, something uh, equal, right? And so only in the last, I don't know, maybe couple of months that I was really debating myself on this. Like, am I really a gender fluid? Do I have like a drag persona? Is there really any other uh, labels that I should be worrying about? And then it hit me like, should I be worrying about this at all? Or should I be worrying about only the collective aspect? And then, well, I would just say how I would prefer to be called and what are my preferred labels, and that's okay. Like, so I really wanted to hear from other people about how they perceived this kind of label situation. And it was really hard to me because I follow the line for such a long time, and I know about the transatlantic, but I only very recently, like last week, that I uh, came out in a public setting that that I consider myself a gender fluid person, and that I would perform different uh, genders according to my feelings or my expressions that day. And so I thought, wow, I should really give the program a call. But then I'm like, wow, I'm gonna talk to like thousands of people. That's a lot of public. So, but
Yeah.
it was great. Like I totally agree with your statements, and it really helped me to like clear my mind about I think this label issue and how we can like help each other also with expressing ourselves in a way that we are most comfortable, I think.
Yeah. You picked the perfect label to just do whatever the hell you want to do. Like, honestly, that's part of the communication aspect that Ben was talking about is like, when I say I'm gender fluid, you don't have a clear idea of what that means because there isn't like a strong social expectation for what that is. So basically, it means like, yeah, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. And hopefully that doesn't stand in the way of you having like unity with other queer people, as frustrating as it can be sometimes for those expectations to, like queer communities themselves create certain boxes and ideas about what it is to be non-binary or what does it, a they them. I know what a they is. Like I have an idea of what that is now. It's like a trans mask with a button-down shirt. So yeah. Yeah, if we helped you, I'm so glad. If you don't have anything else, then I think we are ready to move on to the next caller. Do you have any last comments you want to make?
No, I think that was really helpful. I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful for the community and the space we have here. And I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice. Thank you. And yeah, we're here every Thursday if you want to just get some community time hanging out in the chat, chit-chatting with people. We really appreciate your call, Lucas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Another successful call. We've done it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun getting non-binary specific stuff sometimes. Like, the world is so binary, occasionally we just got to talk about what it's like to be genderqueer.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
for today, don't forget your $5 super chats. We'll read them out loud at the end of the show. Always appreciate it. Directly support the show. You can also get a membership so you can get away from the slow chat, which is frustrating as hell sometimes. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button. So the lines are closing, just so you know. If you want to sneak in really quick, we might be capped out for the day. So we want to make sure we get to everybody. Next on the list, we have Ellie, she, her from Texas, wants to talk about transitioning being bad for kids potentially. Lay it on us, Ellie. How you doing today? Yeah,
very
a
excited
good call.
about this conversation.
What's up, Ellie?
Hi. Yeah, I know it's kind of a weird question, but it kind of came up while I was talking with this guy. I don't remember how it came up, but transgenderism came up, and I was totally unprepared for it. And he started talking about, like, there's a study that transgender people have become more depressed later. I was like, yeah, but is that because of the transgender or because of society? And he moved on to say, like, oh, what about for the kids? It's bad for the kids. It's unhealthy for them. Are their parents forcing them into it? I was not prepared for this conversation at all. But I was like, I don't really have the information I don't feel qualified to talk about this. I think the science and the doctors are more competent on this, and they seem to think that's okay. He seemed to think surgeries are happening to children, which I can't find that anywhere. But
Mhm.
I wasn't prepared for the
Yeah.
conversation, and I have someone who's in my family, in my life, who's non-binary. So I want to be a good advocate. And
Yeah.
after that conversation, I realized I'm not knowledgeable on this stuff. So when he brought up the kids, it felt like he was like appealing to, that thing that people do where like, oh, but the children, like, yes, of
Mhm.
course, but like,
Yep.
what are you actually saying? And how do I refute that? How do I address that? Because like, of course we need to be taking care of kids, but I don't know anything about this.
Well, you're in luck. You're in luck because
I'm
I'm a
really nervous.
physician I'm a physician and a trans person here with recommendations. So there's depending on how the discussion went, it sounds like this person that you were talking with has zero knowledge at all about what's going on with the recommendations for gender
Yeah, he's
transition for
mentioning
children.
studies I'd never heard of
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah. So I would recommend if people try to have this discussion and try to bring the science into it, the easiest thing is ask them for their sources, because more than likely they cannot provide them for you. And if you ask any, like, as probably the best tactic for anything that you're not as well versed in is just ask them questions to get them to give you their data, give you like their claim, pin them into the corner, make them tell you like what they are arguing, and then hold them to what they're arguing. And that can be scary for a lot of people who aren't as like debate minded, but asking questions to just see where are they coming from, where's their thought process, how are they assessing the content that they read to get to this conclusion, because there are several studies that are floating around that are not evidence based, and a lot of opinion pieces, and a lot of people will cite things by a very popular Colin Wright as one of them, or there are a few people similar to him, but he's notable because he does have a legitimate like science degree, and so people will say, oh well, this scientist who has studied biology obviously has some credibility in this area, and they're not taking into account that they're citing his opinion pieces on the internet and not citing an actual evidence-based study. And so just because somebody may seemingly have credentials does not mean that the source that you're citing is a legitimate source. So additionally, with things that have come around recently, is like the Cass paper, which is wrong on so many levels. It's so incredibly dishonest. And something that I do a lot on my end is tackle things from a statistics standpoint, which is not as easy to do for someone that, number one, can't get past a lot of paywalls for some of the studies, but also it takes a lot to kind of analyze like what is the meat of what the studies are showing. And oftentimes some of those papers, like the Cass report, will try to apply very niche situations and assume that they are generalizable, and then say, well, this doesn't work, this is a bad idea because you can't do this for everybody. And like, but the studies that you had picked from, like, because when you do a meta-analysis or anything, you pull from a wide variety of studies. Like you do this massive search on a database, multiple databases usually, pull out all the studies you possibly can, you filter through them to see what applies to your question, and then you kind of summarize things and then say where you need to go forward. If you are cherry picking poor studies, like especially ones statistically poor, that have modified their levels of significance, if they're underpowered, if their sample sizes are small, etc., you can claim basically anything is scientific and people will not look into it because that information isn't as accessible. But something that is a lot more accessible, and actually I want to see if we can put some of these in the description of the video, But I have in front of me two things. The AAP is kind of harder to access because they have a bit more of a subscription wall, but some very credible, reputable sources that are the gold standard guidelines for managing kind of this medical nuance are the AAP, or the American Academy of Pediatrics, not to be confused with the American College of Pediatrics, because that's a hate group. The American Academy of Pediatrics have their recommendations for gender affirming care, and they have all of their reasons for why they are in support of gender affirming care and the recommendations for different age groups. But one that, apart from the AAP, the Endocrine Society has a whole list of guidelines that are not hidden behind a paywall. And so we can put those in the description later on. But I have the full bulletin of guidelines for clinical practice for endocrinologists on the topic of gender affirming care for youth, including like children and adolescents, as well as adults. All of the criteria for diagnosing gender incongruence or gender dysphoria at those age ranges, what criteria you need to meet to get certain treatments, and the level of evidence and the level of recommendation that they're suggesting for each of these things. And a whole section on, what are the risks associated with any of these. But if we look at the recommendations on kind of a tiered system, each journal and each society has their own kind of like numbering system or whatever to say, is this absolutely beneficial? We recommend this thing for everybody all the time, to like, this is mostly recommended, we don't see any harm to it, etc. So in this system, we have like level 1 or class 1 evidence that says this is recommended, this is indicated, useful, beneficial, should be performed, and should be used over other things, to where the benefit strongly, significantly is greater than the risk. We have level 2 or class 2, which is like, it's not quite as strong as a level 1 recommendation, but it suggests this is reasonable, this is useful and beneficial in the right context, this is recommended, you are not wrong to do this. And then beneath that, you have things kind of getting into like weaker evidence or weaker recommendations, saying that this might be helpful, you might consider this, and then like, because that's kind of like later on in the 2s for some things. And then class like 3, and sometimes there's a 4, are where either the benefit is equal to the risk, and you say, you're kind of flipping a coin for whether you're going to get one result or the other, or this is actually harmful, you should not do this, and it should not be considered or administered. So using that whole tiered system in the entire list of guidelines, pulling them up here because I have the PDF in front of me. There's, of course, and when people are asking about, like when they're talking about gender affirming care for children, people are very, very bad at defining what they mean by that, because there's a difference between social transition, there's a difference between like hormone therapy, puberty blockers, and even gender affirming care includes regular preventative medicine for all people, like breast cancer screening is gender affirming care. Psychotherapy for any number of things, including gender dysphoria, is gender affirming care. Like there's a whole spectrum of things that fall under gender affirming care. And of course, surgery also fits into this. But there are studies additionally that I can cite that I have in front of me that suggest that, at least with the population that they polled, the majority of like children or adolescents in that population did not desire genital surgery, and were not considering it. And of course, that might change at some point in time. But genital surgery is often not the forefront of people's thought process, and it is not performed on like children under the age of 16 in most cases, because that's kind of where you're able to determine competence to consent to that. But even so, really, that's more so top surgery would be done around 16. I haven't seen any cases done under the age of, like, usually 18 is kind of the cutoff of, like, you need to be an adult to consent to genital surgery. But the argument will often
Right.
go that people will say you're pushing surgeries, genital surgeries on children to make you think toddlers, which is not happening. This is not happening, or at least if it is happening, it is not under recommendations. It is not like mentioned as being safe. Like, that thing is not what we're talking about when we say gender affirming surgery for minors. What is actually the topic of discussion is top surgery for 16-year-olds. That is the thing that is actually happening and has evidence behind it that for a lot of people, that is a class 2 recommendation. Not for everybody, but for some people, they meet criteria at that point. And so people will say, well, 16, technically a child, I can say they're doing surgeries on children. And that's where you kind of get that misinformed point. And I'm sorry that I'm kind of dominating this discussion. But if I just briefly
No, that's
read
helpful.
some of the summary for these guidelines, because there's a lot here. There's a lot of stuff here. But for youth specifically, where's the section? Yeah, so we recommend that patient pursue gender affirming surgery only after the healthcare provider and the mental health provider and clinician responsible for endocrine transition therapy both agree that surgery is medically necessary and would benefit the patient's overall health and or well-being. This is a level 1 evidence or level 1 recommendation. We advise clinicians approve gender affirming surgery only after completion of at least 1 year of consistent and compliant hormone treatment, unless hormone therapy is not desired or medically contraindicated. That's not really, they don't have as much passion about that point. They say, there's another good one. Yeah, we recommend that clinicians refer hormone-treated transgender individuals for genital surgery when the individual has had a satisfactory social role change, the individual is satisfied about the hormonal effects, and 3, the individual desires definitive surgical changes. This is, again, a class 1 recommendation. Here, their recommendation is to delay. Here, we suggest that clinicians delay gender-affirming genital surgery involving gonadectomy and or hysterectomy until the patient is at least 18 years old or of legal age of majority in his or her country. This is a class 2 recommendation. And then we suggest that clinicians determine the timing of breast surgery for transgender males based on the physical and mental health status of the individual. There's insufficient evidence to recommend a specific age requirement, and that is a class 2. So these are the official, at least in America, Endocrine Society evidence-based guidelines, and they're very clearly defined and laid out what those parameters are. And so I know that was a lot of meat there, and I do want to put the link to this in the discussion so people can read it, because I think all of those just kind of debunk the points that are being shared out.
Yeah, when I was talking to him, it didn't seem like he was necessarily being bigoted or anything. It just felt to me like he had some wrong information, but I wasn't sure about my information, so it got me like thinking about it and like what I can do to address it later on. But is it okay if I ask one more question of you guys?
Oh yeah, no, please. I talked way too much. Feel free to like contribute as much as you'd like to this discussion.
Okay. Well, I had one more question that was a little bit more personal about it that I couldn't find anything on it. So as you know, as we're talking, he says that, you know, when his sister was young, she had this phase where she felt more like a boy and that she kind of grew out of it. I had that too. I had, I did the boyish stuff. There was a little time where I thought, like, I think I'd be better. I think I'd feel better that way. Then I kind of grew out of it, and it doesn't really affect my life anymore. But it did get me thinking about that and thinking, like, that was the only part of our conversation where I felt a little less sure about, like, where I sat on the topic, because that's something I hadn't thought about in a while. I'm just curious, what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, what age were you when that happened? And what age was your friend when they had theirs?
I'm not sure what age she was. It was.
Do you know what kind of age range?
So I didn't get that information.
Like, was it?
I was.
Do you know if it was like early childhood, middle childhood, like early adolescence?
No, I was like early adolescence. Like, I don't know, around 10, somewhere before or after that time period.
So the process for transition is not as fast as people think it is. In fact, it's very meticulous, especially for minors. It's very meticulously slow to make sure that you are meeting the criteria necessary to start something that could potentially be irreversible. And so the first step to anything is therapy. And I think therapy is great for everybody in general. Unfortunately, there's not as great access to that kind of care. But the first step is like therapy, letting them kind of talk it through with somebody who is a qualified mental health professional that can kind of assess, is this gender incongruence, or is there another component? Because one of the biggest criteria to meet is that there isn't some other condition explaining like what's going on. Like if the underlying thing is, let's say, clinical depression, and some or if like it's something's related to trauma. I don't know what a lot of people could be going through, but they can kind of tease out, like, is this something that the person, like, how did they feel about their gender? How do they feel about their identity? Like, what else needs to be done before we kind of move forward? And then the step kind of in there is like social transition, because that's completely reversible. Like, those are things that you can do on your own, like growing your hair, like wearing different clothes, wearing makeup, like all those things, like even changing your name. Those are all reversible things. So that's where we start people. And then as people kind of come to terms with themselves and their goals and what they want for their lives, you have the discussion about what does this look like for you? And for some people, social transition's it. Some people don't want medical transition, and that's totally valid. Some people do. And so you kind of have the discussion with them, and you go over, for their point of development, what is appropriate to start them with. There's a lot of stigma right now, especially regarding puberty blockers, which I kind of don't like the word, because it doesn't block puberty, it pauses it for a little bit. But essentially that buys you time in your diagnostic window, as a lot of these papers put it, to say, do you want to like transition medically, or do you want to go through your endogenous puberty? And that can buy you some time to continue therapy and investigating further if you're not sure. And it can also allow you to start hormone therapy a lot slower, so that you can undergo a rate similar to your peers. So there's a few benefits in that, and slowing down the process is what we aim to do. We don't ever whisk somebody back to surgery the second they come out. Like, that's not going to happen. You don't get hormones the first day you transition. That's not going to happen, especially for minors. Like, for adults, you have an informed consent model. We do not have that for children. There's a lot more of a process. So, like, there are kids who
that makes sense.
might have thoughts that go away. And that's, you kind of expect children to learn about themselves and to become who they are. And we encourage that. Like, the probably number one, like, biggest, like, guideline, like with evidence, is allowing your child to just be themselves. Like when we say gender affirming care, like a lot of that starts at home with parental support saying, I support you, whoever you are. Like as long as you're being safe, like I support you and your identity. And that is huge for a lot of people. And once you give children the room to feel comfortable with who they are, they usually end up picking the right path for them. And you have extensive conversation too when it gets to the point of irreversible things. You have to establish with the child that they are ready to make a decision like that. You have to essentially document that they have the ability to make that decision, and you have to go over all of the possible complications and make sure that they understand the risks of it. So we're not giving people something that like they aren't aware of and that we can't clearly demonstrate knowledge of what's happening. So I hope that
Right, it's like much more of
demuddies
a
things a little bit.
process than it sounds like he
Yes.
was aware of, and honestly that I wasn't really aware of, which is what was like booking me. Like I have no idea how any of this works. This is so helpful.
Yeah, there's usually for minors, there's usually somewhere between 3 and 5 specialists on the case. So because you have like your general pediatrician, you'll have your like psychiatrist, and you'll have at minimum an endocrinologist on board too. So you'll have like those 3 people at minimum.
That's so helpful. I feel like way more like I can handle a secondary conversation if it happens. This is so helpful. Thank you so much for answering my questions. That was kind of all I had. And I'll look up those resources. I really, really appreciate you guys taking my call.
Yeah,
No
thanks for
problem.
calling,
Thanks
Ellie.
for listening to
We
me
love having the chance
monologue.
to info dump. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
No, I was looking for an info dump, so that's great.
Yeah. And good luck next time with this debate that you're having. And feel free to call back and let us know how it went, you know?
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much, Ellie. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right.
Cool. Sorry,
And
I
another
like
one down,
dominated
and
that.
another one down. No, that's okay. I was like, I'm just gonna let Ben have this one. I can talk about how to argue, but that's not the same as being like, I literally am looking in front of my face right now at the like the classes of recommendations.
That's why I was a little bit
yeah.
distracted initially, because I was like, I saw that call in, I was like, okay, I gotta have my sources up because that's kind of the whole point. But I am actually gonna like behind the scenes send this link to Arden so we can put it where people can access it.
For sure. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, well, we're getting ready to bring on a repeat caller who's been here a few times. But before that, don't forget, everybody out there, hit the like button, which is the free way to support the show. Send your little comments in the chat there. We're probably not going to read them necessarily while we're in the middle of taking calls. But if you do a super chat of $5 or more, or 5 units or more, I don't really know how it works exactly. I think it's basically like 5 anything or more, depending on what your currency is. We'll read them at the end of the show. We have a whole super chat section where we do nothing but respond to the chat. So we really appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. Are you ready, Ben? Are you ready for Matthew?
Yeah. Am I?
All right. Are you? Take another sip of tea.
Yeah.
Not choking on it this time. Okay. We're bringing back Matthew. Him from Ohio has a question about the brain as it relates to gender. So, Matthew, you are on. Welcome back.
Hey, Dr. Ben. Hey, Luxander. How are you guys doing?
Oh, so awesome. We're so ready. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm all right. So, as you guys have been saying, I've called a couple of times here and there, and somewhere in the fray, we got to the point about gender and sex being in the brain, and I think Luxander was saying that it's in the brain. And Dr. Ben was saying that it's not, and I kind of find myself agreeing with Luxander. But I just kind of want to clarify some things with that and kind of
I
see
didn't
where we are on that.
hold on. I never said that it's not in the brain. I just
Okay.
don't. There's a difference between like psychology and an identity versus a physical, like anatomical feature, if that makes sense. Like I don't think
Okay.
gender is anatomically neurological. It's an emergent property of like
Consciousness.
your identity and your consciousness. Yeah, it's more related to psychology than it is to neurology, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it seems like gender is a little bit more complicated. So let's start off with sex then. Is that
They're both
that
complicated.
neurological part of the brain? Pardon?
Yeah, they're both complicated. Sex is actually very complicated as well. But go for
Okay.
it.
Well,
Let's talk about sex.
Yeah, let's just start off, I guess, with sex. Now, the sex, is that somewhere in the brain? And both of you guys can kind of give me your opinion. You don't have to just be one person. I want to know from the both of you guys.
I kind of want to ask.
Sex,
I kind of want to turn the question on you.
Yes.
Where do you think sex is, or what do you think sex is?
so with the research I have done, that's why, and I'm doing research even talking to you guys.
Where did you do your
the
curious as well?
hypothalamus-
Where did you do your research? Where did you look for this information?
I think it's NIH. I think that's where my information comes from. National Health.
From what? Yeah. Okay. From what paper do you know?
Yeah.
Or what?
No,
Okay.
I don't. It wasn't a paper. I don't. Not paper or anything.
Was it
That's
was
just
it
kinda where
a
they- where
paper?
I-
Was it a study, or was it an opinion piece? Like, did somebody give opinions, or did they give?
I honestly
like,
couldn't. I couldn't tell you. So that's why I'm kind of
So
having
that's
this
something you need to.
conversation.
So that's something you need to think of before you cite a source, because if you're going to use a
Yeah,
source
I'm
in
not
an
necessarily
argument,
citing any
I
sources.
need it
I'm
to
just
be
saying
valid.
where I kind of.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
Okay.
trying to ask, because
So-
here's the problem. Here's the problem where we get into a lot of
Mhm.
these discussions is people like to make this an
Mhm.
opinion war of like, oh, but my opinion on sex is this or mine is on this. But here's the problem. We're talking about like humans and their physiological functions and their genetics and their anatomy. All of that is very objective. And so I need some,
Right.
if you're going to make assertions that are objective, I need you to bring objective data to the table. And so I think
Okay.
like I can bring better objective data to the table unless you give me a reason to accept yours. So
No, please.
what
Please go ahead
objective
and bring your
what
objective information
yeah,
to the
so
table.
well so
I'll
so
take your-
because
I'll take what you got.
well yeah, so and again, like going forward in this, like the next time you call in, because I know you call pretty frequently, think about that, like, and make your like make sure that your research ahead of time is like good research and not just pull in whatever works for your point of view off the internet. But no, I do want to hear like
Okay.
what your thought on how are you defining sex?
Yeah, sex is just what you're the parts that you're born with, male, female, stuff like that.
So it's just anatomy. It's the parts you're born with. So are you talking about anatomy is your sex?
and anatomy and I'm assuming parts of the brain, like I said, the hypothalamus and how that relates to sex and gender.
But so it's just anatomy. So you understand there's a difference between anatomy and physiology, right? Like while they're interrelated, structure and function are interrelated. Structure does not dictate the physiology.
Yeah, so physiology would be more of like the hips and how those are formed or whatever. And
No.
anatomy would be more like the general
Physiology
genitalia.
is no anatomy. Hips are anatomy as well. Like no physiology relates to hormones as well. Like the whole, the process, like the human process, essentially. And so I'm just trying to I'm pinning you down a little bit because it's very easy to throw out a general statement of like sex is the parts you're born with, but like let's be specific because humans are also born with like a spleen and a gallbladder and a pancreas. Some people aren't born with certain parts of their body, and so that would be an anatomical difference. Does that put them in a bucket? Are we going to make societal standards based on who was born with 2 kidneys or who was born with 1 kidney? Can I go to a bathroom for people that have 2 kidneys? Can I kick people out who only have 1 kidney? Like, what specific criteria are you using for sex?
Like for me, and like I said, this comes from I'll take it that it comes from an ignorant place. It's just the anatomy and brain function. So
Okay,
we can go,
which anatomy?
We can go from
and
your
you're
point,
listing
from your point of view.
Which anatomy?
Like the genitalia and the brain.
I love how you're just lumping the brain in with this as if it's like you acknowledge that it's a separate component, but trying to include it with these other things. What if I told you as well that internal and external anatomy are different and don't always align?
Okay.
So to me, and this leads into kind of my definition, to me, and I use the phrase to me, but really this is the medical definition, is that sex is multifactorial. It is a combination of multiple components, including internal anatomy, external anatomy, hormones, chromosomes, and genes on those chromosomes, because you can have genes that are supposed to be on one chromosome that aren't there and end up on other chromosomes. Gamete production, all of that relates to biological sex, if you will. So it's very inaccurate to lump all of that into just one thing. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't know if Luxander has a different perspective on that.
I mean, basically, yeah, I view, like, I mean, I try my best to base my opinion on the evidence as much as possible, and the evidence seems to indicate that people can have a number of factors of, that are typically associated with one sex, mixed with other features that are typically associated with another sex. So yeah, like, I might say it differently because I'm not a physician, but generally I would say, like, yeah, it's like genitalia, chromosomes, hormones, secondary sex characteristics, and like your brain is part of it in the sense that it clearly informs how you move forward in your life with these things. Like, and I relate it to ice cream flavor because, like Ben said, we don't have a way of like scanning the brain and seeing that it's a male or female brain, and there's no gay part of the brain and there's no trans part of the brain. We might see that the pleasure center of the brain lights up when you have the favorite ice cream, and maybe like a different part of the brain that's associated with disgust might light up when you have the ice cream that you really hate, or like mango sherbet or something. So like clearly the brain is involved because we can have very strong like neurological reactions or like emotional reactions to different things. And that's what the dysphoria diagnosis is about you, I think dysphoria is still basically defined as like a clinical degree of distress that you feel when you have like a gender incongruence, or if you feel like your body doesn't match what you feel like in your brain. And the way that I often relate this, and I don't know if this has necessarily been substantiated through evidence, but like I relate it to like phantom limb kind of thing. Like you have a brain body map where your brain has an expectation of what you're supposed to look like. And so that's kind of like the closest analogous relation that I can make when we're talking about other neurological conditions that impact your self-awareness to this degree. So like when I say the brain is an organ of sex, I'm saying like the brain clearly informs how you view your body in a sexed or gendered dynamic, and that is multifaceted as well, because sometimes you have like the social aspect where you don't like being called this or that, or, like Josie says, like she always wanted to be in the kitchen with the women and she did not identify with any of the men in her family. And then there's the more internalized, like, oh, I should have been born with this other body type. Like it feels like I am existing in a body that is not right for me. And that internal incongruence causes a clinical level of distress. So I don't know. Does that help at all?
So you gave a point about the brain congruence and that phantom limb kind of idea. So is there a part of the brain that knows that you have male or female genitalia?
I mean, your brain, like, you can perceive things and be aware of what you look like in context, I guess. Like, I mean, your whole brain, your consciousness, I guess, is like aware.
It's your awareness of self and aware of what body parts are connected to your nervous system. Like, yeah, you have like proprioception and sensory, like, perception, like all of those things. You are aware of parts of your body through your brain, through like your sensory function. That's what sensory function is for. Matthew, this is, I'm kind of curious where your point is going with this, because what it's kind of suggesting to me is that your knowledge of like anatomy and even psychology is very poor, and I think it'd be good for you to have like a class, like an entry level psychology class and like anatomy class. I think those would be a good starting place.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's probably been a long time since maybe the information has changed from my intro to psych and physiology, but I'm just trying to understand where you guys stand on your point of view, and I feel like we're getting somewhere. So please don't.
Where
I'm lost in the sauce. I feel like I feel like you guys are helping me figure something out. And so we talked about the consciousness. Like if a let's say someone, I guess you have proprioception too. So is that the only way, like awareness of proprioception? Like if a male knows he has male genitalia proprioceptively, is that the only way that the brain kind of tells him he has this genitalia, or are there other parts of the brain that cause them to know that they have that certain genitalia?
I'm very confused about that entire statement, because like your body has parts that are all connected and you can feel them, and your brain knows that they're there because of the neural network, and because you can feel those
and
things.
Also your eyes.
And and your eyes, and you can see them. That is separate from I want to have this thing attached to my body, and it's also separate from this thing that is attached to my body assigns me to this group in society and dictates how I live my life. Those are very different things, and they're all still related to the body that you have. But let me ask you a question, Matthew. Let me ask you a question. If you are one of the people that had gynecomastia, if you had high levels of estrogen in your system and you developed prominent breast tissue that you were not able to hide unless you really tried to cover up, how would you feel about that?
I'd probably get surgery, get it removed or something.
Yeah, so that is gender dysphoria. Cis people have gender dysphoria. And about 1/3 of adolescent males develop gynecomastia.
Yeah,
so
I agree
it's something that
people definitely can have gender dysphoria.
Yeah, and so I think what you're doing is you're connecting dots that don't necessarily immediately connect together. Like a lot of these things are related, and I think Luxander and I are trying to communicate that they are more indirectly related, or they're more distant apart in this web of variables. And I think you're trying to connect them immediately together, and you really can't do that as much. Like there's a lot more nuance and layers and depth to this conversation than like A plus B equals C. And sometimes we can dumb things down to get to an easier level to have it make sense. But a lot of this, you have to have kind of more of a depth of understanding to go through the whole spaghetti of genetics, or the spaghetti of psychology, and how all of these variables work together. And I get that you're trying to understand, and I think we're trying to meet you in the middle here, but I need you to understand a little bit that, like, it's very difficult to quickly arrive at the full complexity that you're trying to uncover.
And maybe it's just my brain, but I feel like you guys are doing a great job so far. I'm just trying to go
Yeah, I'm
further
glad.
in the questioning.
Yeah.
Maybe the last question I asked was a little bit more complicated. I'm just thinking about what Luxander said about phantom limb, and that just makes me think of like, you're aware, and let's say your eyes are not there, obviously you can't see the limb. Like if somebody has male genitalia, they're aware of their testicles, they're aware of the penis, they're like aware of these things, right? So I'm trying to think like, are they aware of it just because they see it and they feel it proprioceptively, or is there some other part that makes them aware of it as well?
I'm curious, why does this question, because you've kind of phrased this in different ways multiple times, what significance does this question have on your viewpoint? Like what is this question doing for your argument?
At this moment, it's just giving me extra knowledge so I can understand. So I'll tell you a little bit more about me. What I try to do is when I try to educate myself on something, whether I debate or whether I care about what someone believes or disbelieves or whatever, all that for me kind of goes away, and I try to just kind of empty my brain and kind of say, okay, what? And maybe because I learned that from being a Marine, but I ask like, okay, what is your point of view? How do you understand these things so that I can get a better understanding of you rather than trying to get my own understanding, and that way I can know where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it feels like
Yeah.
we've come a long way, Matthew, given that I'm pretty sure the first time I spoke to you, you were on the whole large gametes, small gametes thing. So we're clearly getting somewhere. I'm just not sure where that is exactly, or like how much further you need to go, because I think the crux of this is like the idea of like, you know, that question that Josie always comes back to is like, can a trans woman with a penis be a woman? If we can accept that medically the definition of sex is a bunch of different things that are clustered together in a roughly bimodal distribution, you know, like do you still like feel like you're not quite there yet?
I'm not saying that this is not. I'm not saying that my answer would be no, and I'm not saying that my answer is not fact. But I'm willing to couch my answer as an opinion at this point. Like I said, I empty myself a lot to get to understand where you guys are coming from. So I'm not trying to say, let my no answer be right, if that makes sense. Like, oh, let me ask these questions so my no answer is right. I mostly ask the questions, one, because it's available to me. Like, you would be surprised how hard it is to get these questions out in different spaces, especially even with trans people available to you. They'll say, oh, go do your own research, talk to a thing, and it's not. It's like, talk to a trans person. Like,
it's literally my job to answer these questions. Like, yes.
Yeah, they're like, you are a trans person, and I'm like, what? You know, and they'll say, ask a trans person, why are you? And I'm like, what? So for me, it's just like, well, I got the opportunity. The show is there. Just ask these questions. So I'm taking advantage of the opportunity, using it, I guess, as research, which I know it may not be like papers and all this stuff, but I think it's still part of research. So for me, like I said, I like conversation. I'm a conversationalist, so I like to kind of just open up myself to this information. Like, nothing's going to happen to me if a woman can be called a male or whatever, like, or a woman can have a penis. Like, nothing's gonna, my universe is not going to explode. I'm still going to live my life, right? So I'm not afraid to get more information, but I'm really trying here to just ask questions and get answers.
Yeah, so I guess my question for you, and maybe this is something you can go home and think about, but why is it so important for you that sex and gender be in alignment? Like, well, why is that such a hinge point for you?
Yeah, true things are important to me, and it does affect this subject, believe it or not, affects our culture largely. And not only that, there are snowball effects that are going to happen later on down the line, that this information is definitely going to be useful to all of us, right? So I think that
yes, but,
we need to know as
here's
much
the
of it
problem though.
Do the research.
Here's the problem though. You're like, you've done a great job, like, with how far you've come. But I know that you're saying that you empty your mind and just try to take in the information, but you're still holding on to some things that you're previously taught, and it sounds like you're unable to let those pieces go. And I'm trying to figure out
It's an art,
why
not a
these
science, to be honest.
pieces are so tightly held by you. And this is something too, like we in science, we dumb down things frequently. Like, you know, the model of the atom that everybody learns in like grade school, it's wrong. It's wrong. We have so many things that people think this is truth. Like I'm learning what's right, and I'm just going to add on to the things that I already knew. Well, no, because the things that we taught before were dumbed down to help you understand, so that you can learn some more depth later. And it turns out a lot of things, like going through medical school, there's so much that I thought I knew absolutely nothing about. And I think it's cool. I think it's so cool when I said, like, this is something mind-blowing, that I thought it was this thing, and that's completely wrong. And then I changed my viewpoint on it. And like, I too, for a long time, I thought that sex and gender had to be in alignment, had to be congruent. They really don't. Like, we are taught, and I think a lot of us carry that baggage almost of being taught, like, this is how the world is. And some of us hold on to those things that we are told, this is how the world is. And it's hard to let that go and learn what is the correct thing. And so I get that you want to learn the truth, but to say, I'm going to hold on to this grade school level education until somebody can definitively like convince me in my level of education that this is correct. Like, it's hard to convince you of advanced science when you don't understand the fundamentals of science. It's hard enough to understand that as a physician.
I would say my education is not grade level. I do have a college degree.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that you've taken like
it's
higher level biology or neuroscience.
It's like the things you have to take in steps. And to say I don't want to say that I don't like, let's say for me, like, I'm a physician. If I said I don't understand how to perform brain surgery, therefore that brain surgeon doesn't know what he's talking about, and he has to convince me why his methods are correct. I'm not the authority on that. I have no experience to suggest that I should be the arbiter of that information. Like, so I get that I want to know things, but it's my responsibility then to go through the process. Like, and the process is long and it sucks, but like, understand that you might not understand the nuance, and you might not understand like a whole lot of that depth. And like, I just don't want you to hold on to things.
So I guess
just because you can't leap over like 4 different levels to get to that end stage.
I guess my question is, and I'm not trying to be belittling. Are these questions difficult? Like, do you guys not feel like you have the ability to answer some of the questions that I'm asking?
No, I feel like we've been
and the
thoroughly answering them multiple times repeatedly over the course of the last several months.
I guess I'm not going to like to not be belittling back, but I feel like we've been repeating a lot of things and simplifying it as we go, because I think we're throwing things out that are a bit too advanced in the conversation for where we're at right now. And so it's like because I think if you understood what we were talking about, you'd get that these are answers to your questions. And they're
also,
sufficient.
I think we're running into a problem here. Hold on. I want to...
Pardon?
Matthew, you were about to make a slippery slope argument about 5 minutes ago. And so I feel like you are entrenched in your beliefs about sex and gender because you are preparing to make a slippery slope argument about how this is going to be catastrophic for society somehow. And that is just objectively wrong and also kind of bigoted, which is why this is frustrating, because it feels like what you're trying to do is like the safe position of arguing the biology and the science and stuff. And we've tread this ground like 6 times with you, and we're still stuck on this same thing where you pick some new minutia to start off the conversation with. And like you are rejecting the medical consensus that sex is a spectrum of numerous different traits if you are still clinging to your belief that trans women, you can't say that she's a woman if she has a penis or whatever, you know, like
Well,
You
I
have
don't
like
know
a
if that's the case, 'cause,
societal reason for
when Dr.
believing
Ben was
something that is
explaining all these
contrary to the science.
when Dr. Ben was explaining all these different things, I was kind of tracking. I was like, okay, I can see how from the back end, just because I don't like jump in, like I said, I'm like, okay, I see what Dr. Ben is saying there about hormones, and I could agree with that, and all these different things in brain. I feel like where I hit the wall is when this question. I feel like, and maybe you guys do answer it, but I'm asking about. We talked about identifying whether the male or female has certain genitalia, and we mentioned proprioception. We mentioned visual as well.
I can go in a lot of depth.
I don't know question.
I can go in a lot of depth about genitalia that I don't know if you're ready to handle. In all honesty,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're ready to handle this discussion.
We have to have a phalloplasty discussion sometime. That would be so fun.
Well, yeah, but also people who are
really
born
just
with incongruent people who are born with incongruent anatomy. I'm curious about where you would assign some of these people and how they should be allowed to live their lives. Somebody who has, I'm going to give you one here. Have you heard much about or done much reading about androgen insensitivity?
No.
Okay, so this is a condition where usually the person is XY with an SRY gene and the additional genetic components to produce male anatomy. But they can produce testosterone to a sufficient level that we define as a male level, but their receptors do not respond to it. And so the whole male pathway of genital development in utero is testosterone and PDE5. Is that some? I can't remember all the letters, but it's testosterone and other testosterone analog dependent. So if you have all of those other components, but you don't have responsive receptors, you cannot develop that anatomy in utero. So you have phenotypically female babies. Hold on, my cat is like deciding now is the time to demand attention. But you have phenotypically female babies who are XY with high levels of testosterone, female anatomy or female external anatomy, male internal anatomy. So usually they have testes that will essentially like sit in labia. So they have male internal anatomy, female external anatomy. Usually you cannot tell that they are like genotypically male. But what happens at puberty is they're able to convert some of those hormones to where they're able to respond. Like they're able to bind to receptors that will respond. And so then they'll undergo more of a male puberty and develop more as male later on. So with that case, they would most likely not have a fully developed male tract by that point. And they would likely, depending on how obvious the condition was, could very likely be assigned female at birth. So which features are you going to, by which features are you going to assign this person to a sex, and which category will you assign them to?
Yeah, for me, I would let them, if they're privy to that information, they can say whatever they are or whatever they want to say they are. I guess I'm not the
so that person.
That. I'm sure if they
yeah.
Present,
so you're
as a female,
so you're allowing that person. You're allowing that person. No, hold on. So you're allowing that person to be an exception to the rule. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Oh yeah, I would say people like that are exceptions to the rule.
So you've established that exceptions to the rule exist. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, 100%.
So why would you not accept trans people as exceptions?
I'm not, and like I said, this is where my mind is right now, so I have to probably get back into that. But I'm not trying to. Not
sounds like you're dodging the point.
It
sounds like you're dodging the point.
It could, yeah.
You established that some exceptions exist. Why are trans people not exceptions?
like I said, where my mindset is now, because I feel like this is a very important conversation. I have to kind of put my mind to a certain like way of thinking, but I'm not trying to accept or not accept anyone. Maybe you can give me an example of a trans person trying to do something. I'm just listening to your
No,
example, and I'm trying to understand where you're coming
person,
from.
why is that person with incongruent anatomy allowed to make the decision of what sex and or gender they are, but a trans person is not? Why do you treat these two
I think it's, to answer your question, I think it's more because it's physical, like it's identifiable. It's more
But didn't you just say
identifiable.
that you weren't the
Okay, Matthew, hold on. I'm sorry. I need to cut in here. Matthew, this is the premise of the question that we've been posing to you for like 8 weeks. We are saying, okay, so if we can acknowledge this person who was born with androgen insensitivity is an exception to the rule because of their physical attributes. Okay, say a trans woman who has breasts, let's even say that she's had bottom surgery. Let's just say, she has a vagina, no functional gonads, presumably, and she looks like a woman, and like, hell, let's even say that she happens to have that SRY transposition, so she actually does have XX chromosomes. Like, why is it that you can't grant that a trans person is functionally like a non-binary sex, like that? Like that the characteristics have physically, because that's the crux of the question, right? And even if the trans woman has a penis, let's say she has breasts and smells like a woman and soft skin like a woman, like beautiful like soft hair because of estrogen, like, why is she not an exception to the rule? Or why couldn't you say that she has the right or the ability to self-declare that she is a woman if the overwhelming majority of her features are under what we would consider female bimodal traits?
That's a good question, and I'm not saying I'm wrong or right here. I'm just saying that I'm just giving my thoughts, because I'm trying to get my mind into that. It would be, for me, because they weren't born that way.
Okay. That's a reasonable answer to the question.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you didn't dodge it.
I was like, I have further questions on like, why is birth? Why is the time frame? Why does that matter? And also, additionally, previously you said that you weren't the arbiter in this, so I'm getting curious about why you think your opinion matters for any of these things. It's funny that you say, like, whenever you don't have a good response, whenever you don't have a good response. Well, no, and you say that. You say that disclaimer every time you think we're gonna like push back on your answer. It's like you're not willing to own responsibility for your hot takes. But then you'll keep making these statements. So it's like you'll say, "Oh, well, I'm not the arbiter of this," or like, I don't know as much, but here's my position that I'm gonna stick to and not let go of. Like, these are, I'm going to use the word incongruent. These are incongruent. Your words and your level of responsibility is incongruent from your position. And here's something that I'm going to push back just with this thing. And I don't know if Luxander wants to move on relatively soon, or how much they're interested.
We have 3
in this
more callers, so we probably should. We probably should pretty soon.
But like, something I want to leave with you is that every statement I make on this, every decision I make on this, I am held responsible for, because I have a medical license. I am providing care. I am doing these things. So I have stakes. There are stakes attached to the things that I say. There are people who get hurt based on the things that I say. So if I say something that I'm more confident in, you know that I'm owning up to it. And if I'm wrong, I'm owning up to it. You're dodging responsibility for any of this. So, like, you're wanting to make medical claims for people. You're wanting to make personal claims for people. You're wanting to make life claims and decisions for other people. Would you, if you were wrong, would you accept full responsibility for ruining somebody's life based on your decisions? And I think if not, you don't belong in this conversation.
Okay. Oh, well, I would say that, and I hear what you're saying, but I would say that a good question that was asked to me was, why is birth so important? And that's what I feel like. I feel like we're getting somewhere. I don't know what's going on.
See,
I
that
think I
was a
do know
question,
what's
but
going
you're
on, but it's
dodging.
neither here
You're
nor there.
dodging. No, you're dodging my question. You're
I'm
going to
really
answer
not
this, and then we're going
that's
to hang up on
a
you.
good question.
No. Are
Okay,
you
you
willing
can hang up
for
on
these
me, Dr.
statements?
Ben.
No.
Like,
No. Are you? I want you. Are you going to take accountability for the statements you're making and for the people that you could be hurting with your perspective?
yeah, I'll take accountability for anything that I do.
Like in what sense?
Hello?
If you made this decision for somebody else and they got hurt, you'd be okay with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I would not be okay with people getting hurt under my care. And when I do provide healthcare, anything that's to do with healthcare, I'm not. In my profession, there's male and female, because we don't go beyond any type of, like, I'm not assigning anyone birth or anything like that, right? So when I'm training somebody, I'm saying, okay, I'm doing this amount of food or protein for a female versus amount of protein for a male. It's very different. So those things are very easy for me to kind of.
May I ask real quick? I'm sure we're leaving this soon. May I ask what your credentials are? Like, what is your job? What are your credentials?
Yeah, I'm a certified personal trainer, behavior change specialist, nutrition coach, weight loss coach.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
So there's a lot of bullshit.
Everything that you do has to do with hormones, like female and male hormones.
Yeah.
Like trans women are treated like females in these situations.
And there's also a lot of bullshit in the personal training industry and in the health coaching industry. It's like, if you were a dietitian, we'd have more of a conversation. But I can, if you're making these decisions and you think that these personal training decisions are the same to the stakes of making a medical decision for somebody, like, you can absolutely fuck off. And I think we're done with this call.
Yeah, I don't think they're the same.
Okay, Matthew, we're gonna move on. I want to encourage you to call back in the future about whatever slippery slope societal problem that you think there is, because I feel like that's really, the point where we're getting kind of hung up on, that you keep trying to call back about like neuroscience and all these different things. But I want to know next time. I'll be here next week with Arden. I want to know in the future, like, what would be bad for society about acknowledging that trans women are women, or that they have female characteristics. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for calling. I do feel like we could be having a productive direction to this conversation. So I'm not hanging up on you today. Thank you for calling, Matthew.
I did.
You hung up on him. Oh, okay. You took the power away. That's okay.
I did. It was my male privilege.
Yeah.
It was my male privilege. No, it's just when he was bringing personal training into it, and like, there's so much pseudoscience and bullshit.
Oh, there is.
That people use, and there's a lot of stuff that he was saying that is not scientifically valid about, like, male versus female, like nutritional standards. So.
Like, okay,
and
females have a higher rate of this or whatever. Like, it is more like hormone based anyway.
It's hormone. Yep.
Yeah. So, like, okay, whatever. Anyway, God. Okay, hold on. I just need a second. Okay, we're good. Just everybody always says, like, oh, we're so patient with these people. It's like, you have no idea how much I am coping and seething on the inside.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh. But we want to answer the questions, because there's people out there who are unsure or who haven't heard the arguments before. And so we're trying. But yeah, the thing that I find so frustrating about him is that he has like a socially ingrained reason for believing what he believes, but he keeps defaulting to biological arguments as though that's going to shift him, and it's not going to shift him.
And he doesn't even have a good biological argument. We keep giving him the biological arguments, and he's like, nope, don't like that one.
Yeah. Although, yeah, he was on gametes originally, and I feel like at least I'm glad that I don't have to hear that turfness repeated in here about large and small gametes. Anyway, hey, everybody, you out there, if you enjoyed that conversation, or even if you didn't, hit the like button, please. We still have a couple more callers we want to get through, and you can always do a $5 super chat. We will read them at the end. So yeah, cool. I'm ready to move on to the next caller. Next in the line, we have Kitty Tick, she, they pronouns from Oregon, who wants to talk about the LDS Church. Kitty Tick, hello, welcome in.
Hello, how you guys doing today? Hi, Lux. Hi, Dr. Penn.
Impatient right now. That's how
Sorry,
I'm doing.
I
but
am
otherwise,
here. My
good.
cat is trying to show her butthole on camera. And as much as we love that, she's in the way. So if I'm
The Bart
I
hole.
see your cat
wrangling a cat, you know what?
Cool. Well, lay it on us,
But
Kitty.
yeah,
What do you got today?
he was very frustrating. I understand being that guy was frustrating.
Yeah, it's been months of him.
So I was greeted this morning by one of my news alerts giving me an NBC News story about a update that the LDS Church has an update to their viewpoints on transgender people, and transgender members of the church have been allowed for a little while, but they aren't allowed to have like certain like membership allowances. Like they're not a full member, but they're allowed to be in the church, and they're allowed to be respected. And so it was a way to stop losing youth, because they had gotten to the point where they were losing like 4 out of every 5 youth born into the church, and it was just they needed to stop the bleeding. And they'd recently decided to update, and they're going to move anyone who has decided to socially transition or like hormonally or like any kind of surgical transition, basically any kind of transition. If you're in the church, you're getting moved onto the same section of the church's registry as like sexual abusers, sexual offenders, people that aren't safe to be around children. And that's the first time I can like say that anything of a large kind of organization anywhere near the size of the church has put it like in writing that they think trans people are equivalent to sex offenders. Like you hear it as people talking about it, it's a right-wing talking point, but this is a 8 million person organization putting it in their dogma, and that organization is in control of at least 2 state governments by and large, because they're pretty 100% in control of Utah, and they're about 60% in control of Idaho. And that's just wild and scary, because like there's millions of people between those 2 places that could be affected by rippling laws that get like Mormon culture affects the laws in these places. And the Mormon Church also is known to throw its billions of dollars into political funds to try and change the country's viewpoint on things. And I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts on, do you guys think that this is something that we need to be more aware? Like, I want to get the word out to the community, because any trans members of the church need to get their names off of off of the church. You need to actually remove your name from the church if you're a trans member of the church, because you don't want to be on. I certainly don't want to be on any kind of list like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good shout to kind of warn people what's going on, because that is crazy. And it's like, okay, it's not shocking that that's what the LDS Church believes, but you would kind of assume that that's like one of those private kind of like, oh, we're gonna say behind closed doors that this is what we believe, but for it to become official policy. And like, I know that the LDS Church is weird because there's like a list of members, and you have to like request to be taken off of it if you deconvert from the church or whatever. But yeah, for them to be like, we're officially putting your name on the list of basically like sex offenders and like child attackers or something, like that's pretty wild for them to make that like official assertion. And it, I think, definitely shows, the sort of state that we're in, that they felt like that was a safe choice. Like they were trying to scramble to clean up their image by like accepting trans people in some marginal degree. And then now for them to feel empowered to go with this, this like very strong public position. And it also just goes to show that this is exactly the same fucking argument that has always been made about gay people, you know? It's just not socially acceptable for them to say, oh, gay people, we're putting gay people on the list of child sex offenders, like, because clearly that's not acceptable. But yeah, it's wild. Do you have any additions, Ben, or are you just the same as me?
anything-
No,
Like, wow.
not really.
Any thoughts, Ben?
I've done a lot of talking this episode. I'm
You're
trying
good.
to-
Okay, cool. No worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
But, yeah, I don't have as much for this one. I think we're all in agreement here.
Yeah. It's the audacity is really what's striking about it. That they would that they feel like politically and as a business, because LDS I don't think is a nonprofit like most churches. I think that they are like a corporation.
Yeah, they are for
and for them,
profit.
yeah, and they're like doing like, you know, there's some kerfuffle about them trying to build temples in like small Texas towns, and the Texas towns are getting pissed about it because they're like, they might still be sort of tax exempt, or they were trying to build it in a part of the city that wasn't, it was like strictly residential or something. But yeah, so they're still trying to influence more and more communities. They're dumping more and more money into building more temples, and also think that the right move is to fully with their whole chest call trans people groomers. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a wild morning. I texted my mom and didn't tell her anything specific, but I asked for my member ID number because it takes several steps to get your name off the rolls, and you need certain information that's attached to your name because they're like, oh, how do I know you're the one that's trying to get off of the list? And so it's just it's actually annoyingly complicated to get it off, and that's why I don't know. It's actually kind of, that's another really annoying part. They inflate their membership numbers by not letting people leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Mormons, like, it's the closest thing to a cult that we like a giant organized cult that we have. Like, honestly, the ex-Mormon content is like what originally got me watching Jimmy's original content, and now, you know, years later we're here on the line. Yeah, and it seems like it's good to get the process started. Basically, here's a shout: anybody who's on the list for the Mormons, the LDS, you know, get your name off of there, get it started, because they're gonna try to slow you down as long as possible, and then who knows what they're gonna do with that list of sexual deviants that they're creating right now. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and it'll also, I don't know, it's just one of those really, I don't know where the ripples are going to go, and it annoyed me greatly. I did want to share one little thing about an earlier caller, the guy talking about like non-binariness and like what whether or not somebody gets to be like non-binary or anything. Like, from my perspective, non-binary is it's like a group of genders, and that's the largest section of the average population, probably. Like, when it comes to like one gender or the other gender, I think there's less of those than people that don't feel like they fall into either of them fully. And so I feel like we need to be, I call us the alphabet people instead of like a single list of number, like digits or something. I like the alphabet people because it's like everybody's included here. Like all of the alphabet is here. Anybody else, allies, straight people. If you want to come to our side, we're inclusive.
And it's kind of a reclamation because they call us alphabet people as a pejorative because like, oh, you just keep adding letters to this thing. So much like freak, much like weird, much like the slurs, I personally am all about reclamation because you really think you can insult me for being queer? Really? You think that's an insult? I'm just going to double, triple down on it even harder. Guess what? But yeah, we appreciate you calling in, Kitty, and giving us that tip about the LDS.
Thank you
for sure.
taking my call, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll talk
You as
later.
well.
Bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
Okay. Kitty is one of my viewers, so always fun. I bring in some
nice.
audience here. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
And I'm gonna be moving up like kind of to her neck of the woods. So I'm like, it's good to have friends because moving
nice.
2,000 miles away from where I was born. It's not
Yeah, that's
stressful at
a
all.
long trip. It's a long trip.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a 3-day drive in a U-Haul with my cat who hates being in the car. Yeah, we're gonna drug the hell out of him. Gonna get gabapentin that boy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see
Okay,
if I need to
cool.
do the
Well,
same thing to my cat.
yeah, no, I mean, like literally every
see.
20 seconds, he's like, meow, meow. And it's like, okay, I get it. It's been 5 hours. Like, unnecessary at this point. But yeah, we're doing what we can. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the show. We have 2 more callers and then we'll do super chats. If you didn't already know, $5 super chats or more, we'll get right out at the end of the show. You can still hit the like button. Wow. It's available throughout the entire show and it'll boost and get more viewers in here. Crazy. We've been going for like 2 hours, but you can still help. You're doing your part, right? By hitting the like button. Little Starship Troopers reference for you. Okay. Let's go with Logan. She, her from Arizona has a question that I think Ben will be best able to answer because it's a question about research papers. Logan, lay it on us. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you for taking me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just jump right into my question if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so me and my best friend of 10 years were supposed to go on a road trip. And during that road trip, we were going to visit somebody's transition fundraiser. So they were going to get top surgery and they were having a fundraiser and we were going to attend. And at first, she agreed with it. And I guess just one note to make is like she's super religious and I'm very, very atheist. At first, she agreed to it and then she backed out. She actually canceled the entire trip just because we were going to attend their transition fundraiser. And I called her and I was like trying to figure out why she believed this. And she said when she looked it up, she said she found a research paper. It was actually from like a .gov website. And it said that suicide rates are higher in people who transition. And I'm just so confused because I found several articles also from like .gov and like Veteran Association that said it was like lower. So I'm like, I don't know how to distinguish. So they're both from .gov, like which one's right. And then she also said she kept trying to insist like she wasn't transphobic. She was like, I'm not transphobic. And it's like,
they always do that.
I guess my follow-up question. Yeah. My follow-up question would be like, you know, can you, you know, you're holding a transphobic belief. Doesn't that still make you transphobic, I guess?
Yeah, so addressing I can touch on the first point and then I'll let Luxander handle kind of the second point maybe. So with the paper, this is where it's very, very important to understand the parameters of a study and the study design and what exactly they're looking at because like the groups that they're comparing matter. And the big thing about the study that has been used to suggest that surgery makes you suicidal is that they compared trans people and cis people, and trans people have a higher likelihood of suicidality anyway at baseline. So they're always going to have a higher level of suicidality compared to cis people. And it's not because they have surgery. It's not because they regret surgery. It's because society makes it so goddamn hard to be a trans person. And you have those stressors. You have family disowning you potentially. You have a body that you don't like to exist in. You have regrets from childhood of things that you wish were different. You probably have trauma from various interactions with people that didn't believe you were who you said you were. There's so many factors that contribute to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidality in the trans community. So, yes, compared to cis people, trans people have higher suicidality, but it is not saying, that study is not saying that trans people who have surgery have higher suicidality. Probably the studies you were reading were comparing trans people who did not have surgery to trans people who did have surgery. And that data seems to suggest that suicidal ideation decreases in trans people who have undergone their goals of transition. So that's really important, is with the study design, who they're comparing them to, what parameters are they looking at to say something was successful or not. And like, those are kind of the big things. So I think that your friend was misinterpreting a study that is out there, and that is a very common one to misinterpret. And Arden does a really good job discussing that specific paper as well. So,
Yeah.
She
And like,
also,
as far as I've
she
heard,
also
it's
said,
a,
oh yeah, you first. Sorry.
yeah, sorry, I was going to answer the second part of your question.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so that's exactly what I've heard, is like, yeah, it's comparing trans people who've had surgery to cis people instead of trans people who've had surgery to trans people who haven't. So that's, yeah, the problem there. But the idea of like, are you transphobic if you have a transphobic belief? Like, yeah, like if someone holds a transphobic belief and they won't come off of it, that makes them transphobic. But is that useful in the conversation? It might be better to focus more on like this, you hold a transphobic belief, because people do this thing where they believe like, well, I'm not racist, and then therefore nothing I do can be racist, right? And like, they're more likely to tune you out if you are calling them racist, because they feel like, oh, racism is like a Ku Klux Klan person or somebody who thinks that black people shouldn't vote or stuff like that. And they're like, well, because I don't believe the worst beliefs associated with racism, therefore I'm not racist. And like, it might be good also to focus more on like, you believe something that is harmful to trans people, whether we label that transphobic or not. Like, of course, we would view things that are harming trans people as transphobic. It might be easier to just be like, yeah, you're maintaining a belief that is contrary to the evidence and which harms trans people. So we need to fix that. Like, we need to fix your incorrect belief that is harmful to people, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with things that do have a tangible impact on people's lives. Like, you were on your way to help someone get a gender affirming surgery, which for some trans people is life-saving because it resolves their suicidality. And that trans person had to work harder because you weren't there to help out or whatever. Or like, maybe you were going to donate and now they don't have that money. So yeah, that's the bigger problem, I think, here, is that when we hold beliefs that are negatively impacting the group, and you know, it might be true that that person is transphobic in holding those beliefs or in taking those actions, but it just might not be useful to say that to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's actually so helpful. I've never thought of it that way, because too, like, she kept saying like that it was coming from a place of love to not attend, because if anything were to happen to them, it would be like on her guilty conscience, basically. If they were like, if any like complications happened with their surgery, or if they did commit suicide, it'd be on her guilty conscience. So it was like she kept insisting it was like from a place of love that she wouldn't attend. And I think you already like you brought up. Go ahead.
Like, so if I would just some things you can challenge your friend with. Number one, like suggesting to your friend that maybe we need to look at studies not in isolation. You should look at like multiple studies, because if you only read one study and then say that you know enough about any subject, you are very misinformed. But also, like, would your friend say the same thing about attending a fundraiser for someone who needed a kidney transplant, or somebody who needed like open heart surgery? Like, there are so many more complications that can come from those things. Like, I mean, kidney transplant, you have possibly two surgeries that are happening, two people that can be injured from it. You have somebody undergoing immunosuppression for this. You could die very easily from those surgeries, from like rejection of the kidney or from it rejecting you. If would your friends still donate to one of those surgeries? Would they feel the same amount of guilt if their friend died from kidney transplant complications? Because if that's the case, that is like underlying transphobia. Like they might not recognize it as that, but if they're going to treat this person differently with criteria that could be extended more generally, then that is like they are treating somebody different on the basis of them being trans. So
Yeah. I like tried to say that to her too. I was like, we had Googled it and it was like, doctors have like the highest rate of suicide. And unfortunately she just kind of like refused to call me back to like talk about it or like resolve it further. Or to just like even be like, oh, like we're still friends, like everything's okay. So that's kind of sad. But like, I just really appreciate you guys so much for this. This has been so helpful and eye-opening. Do you have any other like things that I could possibly do to like maybe convince her, I guess? I don't know.
have her call in.
Yeah, true.
Let's talk to her.
Yeah. And I mean, it might be good to, like, you know, you can always refer to things like, you know, like a knee surgery too. Like people who get knee surgeries have a pretty high degree of regret and it can cause them suicidal ideation. But like, again, like, yeah, are you going to treat a trans person differently? And like, who are you to say that they might have some future regret if they know that they want it now? Like, is it like, how can you be coming from a place of love if you are denying someone like a surgery that they feel that they need, you know, like, and why do you think that you have a greater opinion than like medical professionals too? It's like these Christian people always asserting that they know more than doctors. But yeah, I think that's kind of like
the part that makes me the most mad.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like the extent of my argumentation on this is like, yeah, just focus on like the harm aspect of, you know, like, you know, what about the chances of this of, you know, the suicidal ideation before surgery versus after surgery, as opposed to the, you know, more general. Yeah. And I'm sure there's more research you could look into, but it's so tough when they want to just hang on to the one. Like, I found one study that corroborates I found a study that gave me a good excuse to do the transphobic thing that I was already going to do. Goodness.
Yep.
Oh, that's so true. Thank you so much. That's the only questions that I had today, and you both were so helpful. You really opened my eyes, so I feel much better prepared, and I really appreciate you guys.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you for calling in, Logan. Yeah, we appreciate you, and hopefully it goes well, and your friend has a great top surgery experience and absolutely kills it.
I hope so too. All right, bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Just giving out advice left and right today. Good stuff.
It's fun. It's fun coming back to this show more as like having more clinical experience under my belt and with a little bit more confidence in my skills. You know, it's fun.
Yeah, I love that you can speak from a place of authority and it's not like a fallacy appeal to authority. You're like, actually, I'm in so much debt that is indicating that I know all of this shit right now.
And I have sources and I can cite them, and here you go.
Yep, you have the access to all those behind the paywall. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end. We have one more caller and then we're going to do super chats. Don't forget to hit the like button. And if you have any last minute comments you want to make that you want us to read out, $5 or more on the super chat directly help the show. Appreciate you. All right. So we have this one last caller. Bob, any all pronouns from Belgium, wants to talk to us about trans athletes and fairness in sports. What's up, Bob? How you doing?
Hi, hello. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So lay it on us. What's your question? What do you want to talk about?
Before I do that, can I quickly first, before I forget, tell Dr. Ben you have the greetings from Forrest. They told me to call in while you were on after I was pestering him for 3 days straight about transgender questions and stuff. So
okay.
There you go.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad people are recommending me as a resource.
For sure.
Yeah, I was hoping to call in with a more medically focused topic, but sadly, the place of trans women in women's sport has been a hot topic in my friend group this past week, so it's kind of at the forefront of my mind. Basically, the people in favor of allowing trans women in women's sports and the ones against both argue that the burden of proof falls on the other side, and I was kind of hoping to get your thoughts on that. So the ones who are against argue that since male puberty gives an advantage within certain sports, the burden of proof is on the ones who are in favor of trans women in women's sports, that they need conclusive evidence that there is no unfair advantage retained. And meanwhile, the ones in favor argue that since trans women are women, they inherently belong in women's sports, and as the other side argues in favor of discrimination, the burden of proof is on them to show that there is in fact an unfair advantage and a problem that needs to be fixed before gatekeeping should be done. I guess, yeah, I was wondering where you guys believe the burden of proof lies and whether you agree with either of those statements, or yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to take it, or should I launch in?
You can launch it. You said earlier you were digging these discussions.
I'm always so ready to have this conversation. I haven't gotten bored of it yet.
Go for it.
So when it comes to like broad judgments and you know, I'm sure you were listening to the call earlier where we were talking about the fact that like sex attributes exist on like a spectrum, and like there's an average of like certain average of female level testosterone, certain average level of like height distributed across this range. In order to make a broad sweeping judgment that an entire class of people cannot participate in a way that they want to or that they feel is fair, like you would need a pretty high burden of proof, in my opinion. And even for the people who assert that, oh, well, the burden of proof is on trans people or trans advocates to prove that they aren't, that they don't have an unfair advantage. We have that evidence, baby. First of all, like when trans women participate broadly, they are not dominating the sport. Like they win sometimes, but like the same day that Leah Thomas won one race, she placed dead last in a different race and tied for 5th in a different race. So, you know, what, is it okay if trans people participate so long as they never excel, like so long as they never win? That doesn't really seem fair either. Yeah, and like trans women have been able to participate at the Olympic level for like 25 years now, and we're not seeing them pushing out cis women from the sport. We're not seeing cisgender men transitioning just so that they can excel in those sports. If you look at the top level sports performances, you would be surprised to see how many men, cis men, are in like the lowest range of testosterone. And you know, obviously these are all very physical activities, so it seems pretty obvious that testosterone is not the determining factor, and that, you know, if there were some advantage being conferred, we would see like evidence of this at this point. But yeah, like, and then the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, actually did commission a specific report on this, because generally speaking, when people say, oh, you know, trans women are better at sports than cis women, the evidence that they are pointing to is evidence about cis men's performance, and trans women are not cis men. They do not have the same physical attributes. You know, you can't even necessarily say that they had the same experience in puberty, because what about trans women who were on puberty pausing medication when they were teenagers? You know, can you sweepingly say that no trans women can participate if there are women who never ever experienced testosterone puberty? So yeah, we do finally have evidence about trans women specifically, and trans men actually, and it turns out that trans women are at a disadvantage on several metrics. So yeah, if the burden of proof were on the trans advocate, I have sufficiently demonstrated that there is no unfair advantage, or there isn't even an advantage. Like, that's not even going into whether it's an unfair advantage, because I've asked someone else this. if there is a cisgender woman who has polycystic ovarian syndrome and therefore higher levels of testosterone during puberty, and what if she ends up a little bit taller and her bones are a little bit denser and her muscle fibers are a little bit whatever? Is that an unfair advantage? Should she not be allowed to participate in sports? You know, those are some questions. So I don't know. Does that help at all?
Is there an unfair advantage for so I'm 5'1". If I wanted to play in the NBA, is it an unfair advantage for tall people to be able to compete against me because they have a biological advantage? They should all be kicked out.
Yeah, that's also kind of where I'm at. Like, that's also why I have a big problem with it. Like, sports inherently isn't fair. It's about competition. It's about you want there to be competition, so it can't be like you don't want someone to dominate. But again, like you said, that's not what's shown. And yeah, like some people are gonna have an advantage.
And the whole argument is incredibly misogynistic because it implies that cis women can't succeed against cis men. That's big thing, which we know isn't true. And in the origin of segregated sports, like a lot of that was segregated because women were crushing cis men and they didn't want to compete together because they were butthurt about it. Like, so many sports do not have any reason to be segregated. Like, why is skeet shooting segregated? Like, why is chess segregated? Like, all of this is just misogyny. It's just bigotry. Like, there's no reason to be doing this. So, yeah, like they can go down to their like biological advantage, whatever. I dare any cis men, even like cis men at the like elite levels, to jump in a pool with Katy Ledecky. I dare you. Like
she's like, I was
don't tell me
when I won that race.
Don't tell me that some random off the street trans woman is gonna wreck Katy Ledecky shit in the pool because of some history of testosterone in their puberty. Like, no, like it's the problem we get when we just overly generalize everything. Like Luxander was saying, you cannot generalize these things out. Like, each sport kind of needs to take the evidence and actually take the evidence and make a decision that's best for their sport with criteria that can be met, and those have to apply to all people. So you have to, if you're going to make criteria based on hormone levels, you have to apply that to cis women as well. And we're seeing some of the drama playing out with some opinions on that. And we're seeing cis women get hurt and get excluded because of those biases. So the problem is, like, when you try to standardize this stuff, like, there's no way to include everybody and exclude everyone that shouldn't be there by whatever criteria. So you just have to do the best with what you have. And I think there are a lot of sports that have like some fair guidelines on this. And like, I think it's fair to ask for some level of compromise, like a certain amount of time on like hormone replacement therapy, or like having a certain hormone like threshold. But again, that needs to be applied universally and not only applied to trans people.
I guess if I could jump in here. One problem that the United Nations, I think, has brought up, like when it comes to human rights, the whole being forced to sit under a certain level of testosterone is like, in order to participate in the category you want to participate in, it's kind of, you're requesting forced sterilization in order to not like people have to get sterilized basically in order to not be discriminated against, to not be excluded out of the category they might belong in.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And that's where like my ultimate goal of position would be like stop segregating based on that. Like, because that's really the only way to really like, and then you'd have to figure out how are you going to divide, like, because you could make skill divisions, you can make other criteria, like for example, with, because I do grappling, and so other combat sports, you could easily make category, like we already have weight-based categories, you could like make weight and height-based categories, like etc., and that would be inherently more fair than what we currently have, because there's so much like variability between cis women. I know there's a meme going around showing the volleyball players, and one like really tiny lady and then one very tall lady, and like those are both cis women in the same category, like, and they're very biologically different. Like, so if the goal is to make things more biologically fair, then focus on the criteria that actually contribute to that level of fairness. And so like it'd be much more fair, like I go to this example a lot, it'd be much more fair for a like 130-pound woman to go up against a 130-pound man in wrestling than it would be for a 130-pound woman to go up against a 160-pound woman. But when you're combining divisions at any grappling tournament, if there aren't enough people in your division, they don't combine you with the opposite gender. They combine you with a different weight class entirely of the same gender, which is less fair. So I would agree with those points, and like ultimately we just need to rethink our like how we segregate sports in general.
Yeah, would also be way more inclusive of non-binary people.
Yeah, for sure.
Having to choose between binary options is not the greatest, I think, for mental health in general.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing in the world, for sure. Yeah, and oh my god, the Ritalin has officially worn off. Yeah, and I will say too that the performance difference between cis men and cis women can really be like, it's such a greater predictor of performance to look at like what was the funding that they had when they were learning sports when they were a kid, like, because women's sports is underfunded, it doesn't have like as high of a quality of coaches or as high of a quality of equipment. So, you know, we would have to desegregate sports at all level today, and in 20 years we would see the highest level of sports finally equalizing out, because we would have to accommodate for like an entire lifetime of poor access to, you know, equipment and facilities and good coaches and all this. So yeah, it's a much greater predictor for sports performance than testosterone. So yeah, there's so many different angles that you can hit this at, and they all indicate that it's wrong to discriminate against trans people just because I have a gut feeling that trans women are basically the same as men and therefore they're better at sports, like whatever. Anyway. Yeah. Any last minute commentary, Bob? We're about ready to move on to super chats.
No, I think that was it. Thanks for the call. I'm glad you took it. See you around.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Have a good night and a good weekend.
Thanks.
Okay, before super chats, listen to me. We have so many other great shows on the line, okay? We're off the air for the next 2 days, but on Sunday, we've got the Sunday show with Erika and Seth Andrews. And I believe there's also a later show. It's just not on my schedule here. The like After Dark show on Sunday. We've got Skep Talk on Monday with Shannon Q. We've got Chewed Gum on Tuesday with Alyssa and Eve. And Wednesday, The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. Wow. Good job. Matt Dillahunty and Will Judy. And then on Thursday
That's
next
his
week, you
new
can catch
nickname.
me with Arden. Yeah, Matt Dillahunty. Tell him, Arden.
I've heard so
Arden.
many iterations on his name, but I've never heard that one.
The Ritalin is gone.
Is
So
Matt
good.
our community's version of Benedict Cumberbatch? Like, are we just
Yes!
going to,
Right.
Oh, gosh. Anyway, so many great shows on the line. Go see Matt Dillahunty twice on Sundays and Wednesdays. Okay. With that, I think we're ready to move on to super chats. Just don't forget, if you're in the chat right now, if you pitch in $5 for a super chat, last minute, you can get in and we'll read them. All right, this one's
We're
for you,
too
Ben.
busy laughing about Matt.
Yeah. It's like professionalism.
Anyway, I'm not a child. $4.99 from Sarah Wilson. Happy to see 2 AFAB hosts. Not that the trans femme hosts aren't great; they're wonderful, but it's valuable to have 2 different perspectives. Absolutely, we love diversity. Love that we're expanding the hosts to include some more diversity.
Yes. 5 European numbers from Sean says, oh God, let N be the order of an infinite group and M be the order of its automorphism group. And then some symbols can be arbitrarily small for Euler's totient function. Math.
Love it.
Just,
Sean,
yep.
next time on Bring Me, we'll talk kidney math.
Yes.
$5 from William Matz. This might be a super chat. Dr. Ben, what's your headphones? Lux, love your mug. Honestly, y'all stay safe and be well. These are just some cheap Sonys. But
Nice.
I like these as opposed to like AirPods or other things because I also have ADHD and I will lose things. And if there are separate pieces that I have to account for, I will not know where they are. These will be around my neck and I will not lose them.
Yeah, sometimes my keys are in my hands and I'm like, where are my keys? Like, where? Oh, they're there. Okay, cool. Good job. Or my shades are on top of my head, you know? Classic. And yes, my mug is cute. It was a gift. Adorable. $5 from William Mattis says, are you as swift as a coursing river with all the force of a great typhoon, all the strength of a raging fire, and as mysterious as the dark side of the moon? I like how you managed to fit all of that by just eliminating all the spaces. That was solid.
Yes.
Also, I haven't watched Mulan in way too long. Such a classic.
Yeah. £5 from Sean Isherwood. Male privilege. Math really is unfortunately seen by Western society as primarily a cis man's game. How can we change that? Societal reform. No, yeah, it's a lot harder because again, going back to, I know this super chat was sent a lot earlier in the show, but going to what Lux said about having to like change everything now, eventually you'd have a generation where we don't see that. I think that there are a lot of schools now that are trying to do better, but there's a long way to go.
Yep. Also eliminate the imperial system. Just while we're at it, just while we're at it, just get rid of imperial system of measurement. Oh gosh, $5 again. Thank you so much from William Mattis says, honestly, thanks to this show for 1, helping me understand myself, and 2, helping me use they, them pronouns, and C, just being here. You all rule. We do rule.
Thanks.
We're the monarchists.
We rule because male privilege.
Yes.
10 euros from Fedaya. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Hi, great to catch the show live for once. Good evening from the other side of the Atlantic. Keep up the good work. Hashtag Team Katy forever. And yeah, we miss Katy. Miss her dearly. It is now the Americans have taken over.
True. It's no longer the transatlantic. It's the West Atlantic. Yeah.
The cis Atlantic.
Oh, God. Yeah, it is.
I think we're pulling an MTV where it's no longer transatlantic call-in show. It just is TACUS. Just like MTV is no longer music television. It's just MTV. We are the acronym now.
True.
Yeah. I kind of want to be the cis. Yeah.
It is funny. We have cis in the name.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. £5 or something from Herbie Shine says, thank you to the hosts and to the line for Tekis. As a cis man, I find some trans stuff difficult to understand. You help me to be informed. I didn't yell the word trans. I did think about it though. But yes, we're glad to help you.
Trans.
The trans stuff difficult to talk about. Anyway.
I believe this is 5 Australian. We all know Australia isn't real. Just kidding. From Darren McAuliffe. Is there a physical difference between a male and female brain, or is that theoretically possible? We used to think that was the case. We no longer think that's the case because we made up a lot of reasons to create hierarchies in society, and that's basically what it was. But there's no measurable anatomical difference in the brain. It's again separating out neurology from psychology and all of that. You can go back and watch that call again.
Yep. No brain scans for gender. It don't work like that. $5 from Jax Takabe says, I love the Luxander smirks. This is not commenting on their physical characteristics. It's the meaning that makes me LOL. Yeah, during I think it was during Matthew's call that this came in. I'm just sitting there like, yep.
Oh yeah,
and, like,
I saw that.
Sometimes I can't help it. My face is just, this is why I can't work retail anymore. I can't hide anything.
Yeah. 100 Sex from Valdegast. What does Dr. Ben think about the hypothesis that parts of gender dysphoria is a result between a mismatch between right side's metasensory cortex and the body? I don't know. I don't know enough about this hypothesis to have an opinion on it. That's the most honest thing I can say.
I'm sure there's more reading to be done.
Yeah, for sure.
Always. $5. Thank you from Monkey at Typewriter. Says, never underestimate the power of a person who doesn't want to understand a thing to continue not to understand. I think ignorance is an identity now. It does feel that way sometimes. When you're talking to Matthew, sometimes it feels like he's making a deliberate choice. And he's transitioned into an ignorant person.
Yes, I love the phrase willful ignorance. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are in that camp because we've given information. There's a lot of information to be found. And it's up to you if you want to apply it or not, or look into it. $10 from Jimnick6. Learned a lot from the host responses to Matthew's arguments on several of the calls. He really is the Teflon of callers. Thank you for enduring the frustrations. It really does make a difference. I appreciate that. And I know Lux had mentioned this earlier too, that, you know, the patience sometimes is an appearance. It is sometimes a front for me in my own head, smashing my head against a wall.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, the Teflon of callers. I saw that when they first messaged that in the chat, and I'm like, Lamau, because he is. He's like, I'm rubber, you're glue. Like boing flip, it won't stick to him. It just won't. Anyway, $4.99. Thank you from Ben 9 Live says, thanks for your medical expertise in explaining some of these issues. Thanks, Dr. Ben. Yes, we appreciate Dr. Ben and his expertise.
Glad to be back.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. One came in right as I did that. Hold
One
on. Oh, and another one. Okay,
2 more.
So buckle up, fuckers.
$4.99 from Ben 9 Lives. Thanks for... Oh, no, that's that one. £5 from Sean Isherwood. Kitty Mass, I'm intrigued. Do go on. Oh, this could be a whole thing. I'll figure out a way to get you this content without taking up an entire show not about kidneys. But go look at, just go start reading some nephrology. You'll find it. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's all math all the way down.
Yeah. And last super chat for today, $5 from Jamnik again, says Tuesdays are Tuesday and now Wednesdays can be Dillahunty Day. True. Yep. Let's immortalize that forever.
I mean, no, and it's perfect for the show that we have on Wednesdays.
Yeah, the hang up, right? I don't actually watch any of the other shows on the line.
It's Dillahunty Day.
Nice. Tell him I sent you. Well, cool. Thank you everybody so much for joining us today. I will be back next week with Arden. We're going to see lots more of Ben coming up soon. No longer working like 14-hour days. Got to be something of a relief.
At least for now. Yeah.
For now, at least. Yeah. So yeah, thank you everybody so much. And we'll see you next time. Let's roll the credits. Oh my gosh, look at all of this over here. Nope, it's over here. I always forget which side it is. Join the Patreon. Get your name listed in the credits. Join the Discord. Look at the list, it gets longer every time. I gotta sit here and dance for like 30 seconds.